So am I the only one who brought my Bible? Nobody else brought a Bible? I didn't ask for applause. I'm just asking. Did anybody else bring a Bible? Okay, nobody brought a Bible, so that's fine. So this is about God. I am unprepared to tell the story. I was unprepared the last time I told the story, and it went all right. So hopefully this time it'll also go all right.
It's raw. It's good.
Yeah, raw. Thank you. I appreciate that. So when I was researching, thinking about this story that I wanted to tell, I was looking back on the stuff I'd written about it just 10 years ago. Let me start at the beginning. When I was 29 years old, I fell in love with a born-again Christian. I was raised Roman Catholic. I've been not really Roman Catholic at all, ever. Even when I was Roman Catholic, my parents, when I learned how to drive, my parents would let me go to church by myself. And I wouldn't go to church, I would go to the record store. And they caught me once. And that's another story. Anyway, met a born-again Christian, agnostic at the time, profoundly, possibly atheist, didn't really know. And we really hit it off. And her name was Becky, and she challenged all the notions that I had, and I think that we all have, about what a born-again Christian is, which is a lot of the things that I think we've heard tonight, and I don't think I need to recount a lot of the general impressions people have of born-again Christians, which I have as well. But she was just a wonderful person. She was profoundly intelligent. She was kind. She was graceful. She was caring. She was open-minded. We would have arguments that she would respond to in a way. She would be open to my disagreements about God. She would often say things like, "You hate God," which it's a little inflammatory because I never said I hate God, but nevertheless. But she was, which was crazy to me, and I never expected myself to fall in love with any born-again Christian. I don't think she ever expected herself to fall in love with somebody who was not a Christian at all. But there we were. So we dated through the summer. This was 2000, I don't remember what year it was, 2004 maybe. We dated through the summer, and she had gotten admitted into the Hebrew University in Jerusalem to get her master's in religious studies. So she was going to go away in October to live in Jerusalem for 2 years. We had met at a Second City theater, which the comedians in here will know what it is, maybe some. And we both worked there, and this was in Cleveland, so like most things in Cleveland. Not to rip on Cleveland, because I love it, but it went under. It was going under. So we knew we were going to have to get out. So she encouraged me to do something crazy and ridiculous, so I moved to Korea in October when she moved to Israel. Which is a whole nother story that I'll get into later. A side note, when I told my parents I'm moving to Korea, they said, Jeff, we think it's great that you're going to do something exciting and move somewhere, but why are you moving to Korea? I said, because I don't know anything about it. I didn't even know how to say hello. But that's another story for the travel day, right? Or something like that, or something, whatever, we'll find it. Yeah. So anyway, so I'm living in Korea, and she's living in Jerusalem. And, we were still kind of dating. And it came to December, January, early January. And she said that she had come to a realization that she could not be with me anymore because I was not Christian. Which seemed inevitable, really. I mean, thinking about it, it seemed inevitable because it didn't really make sense in the first place. But it was hard to swallow because, I had fallen in love with this person, and she had, admittedly many times fallen in love with me. And she made it very clear how difficult it was for her to even make this decision. And it was very strange to me as someone who didn't really understand the whole God thing, And she was a really very smart woman, and I couldn't understand why she would basically seemingly pick God over me, right? So I thought, well, maybe it's time I looked into this. Maybe it's time I thought about. I had never really spent time like actually looking for God, trying to actually see if there was a God. I just kind of dismissed it out of hand. So I started a blog, which back in those days was kind of I think, everybody knows what a blog is, but back in those days it was a newer thing. TypePad was a company. Anyway, so I started a blog, which is still up to this day, and it was called I Am Looking for God. I bought a Bible, which is the same Bible, bought in South Korea for 18,661. I don't know how many dollars that is. But, and I thought, well, I'm going to read the whole Bible. I'm going to read this thing from cover to cover, right? And I'm going to pray. I'm going to do this as earnestly as I possibly can, because I want to know. Like, if I'm going to lose this person, I'm going to know that at least I lost this person for a good reason, because I don't get it, So let me find out that I don't get it before I decide. So I started reading the Bible, and I started writing in this blog. And so I'm going to read a few of these little entries. It's still up. IamLookingForGod.com. That's not a plug. It's just, if you're interested in further research, you can go there and read some more. Because it's actually, like I looked back, and I was telling my girlfriend, it's like fascinating to read something I wrote 10 years ago or 11 years ago, because it's like I don't remember even being that person. Because this blog, there's a lot of comments, like a lot of controversy. So anyway, January 10th, 2004, my first post. She told me she couldn't be with me because I wasn't a Christian. Though I'd expected it, I still found this surprising, considering the extent we had fallen in love with one another over the past year. Apparently, it still wasn't enough to compete with God, which both confused me and made me more unsure of my own agnosticism. One of the last things she told me on the phone, after I had repeatedly told her that I would be a mess without her, and had asked her who I would talk to, if not her, was, talk to God. Later that night, as I was lying in bed staring at my empty room, I decided to take her advice and look for God. It's easy to see this as a clear response to my inability to be with her, and perhaps that's all it is. The fact is, I have never really looked for God with an open mind and an open heart. I've only argued against the existence of one. I've never even read the whole Bible, only bits and pieces in my Catholic Sunday school days and in high school English class. So maybe it's time, maybe out here all alone with nothing but time and heartbreak, I should search for what I was once so eager to disprove. Now I should say, has anybody in here read the whole Bible? The entire thing? Well, very good. But for those of you who haven't, there might be some spoilers. So just don't want to close your ears or something. And I should also say that, when this was happening, I was living in Incheon, South Korea. And I don't know if anybody knows where Incheon, South Korea is. It's about an hour and a half from Seoul, on the coast where MacArthur, pardon me, the guy on the politician with a dry mouth thing, yeah. I did that joke the last time, too. So I was living in Incheon, Korea, which is where MacArthur came in during the war, on the side, came in. It's a huge town, but everybody thinks about Seoul when they think about Korea. But Incheon, it was a very isolating experience. I'd only been there 3 months, and I was isolated both culturally, because when you're in a country like South Korea, you are a white person. That's what you are. I rarely ever saw any other white people, and everybody stares at you. And you understand the experience of being another. And it was profoundly isolating, and I was the only English speaker at my school. And the way that the principal told me how to teach on the first day was he handed me a book, an English book, and said, "Go teach. Go use this. Teach." I was like, oh. So anyway, so that's where I was then. And so I was in a pretty profoundly lonely place. And I'll continue. February 6, 2004. I talked to a guy about Christianity. There was one expat bar in Incheon called the Goose Goose, where you would go there and it was suddenly white people everywhere. All the teachers went there. That's where this happened. Talked to a guy about Christianity last night. He believes that the universe is only about 10,000 years old, because this is what the Bible indicates. I asked him how he explains light from distant stars, and he said, "I don't know." When asked about carbon dating, he responded that he believes it is only accurate up to about 10,000 years or so. He said something about how it doesn't matter to him what science discovers, as he knows that the Bible is the only true source. This attitude troubles me, as it indicates a closed-mindedness to anything that could possibly contradict what the Bible says. Whether you're a Christian or not, shouldn't you be open to the possibility that your belief system might be incorrect in some ways? To completely disregard scientific discovery in light of religion is just as ignorant as completely disregarding religion in light of science. So, yeah, Korea is a very Christian country. The Christians from America came, and I may be getting this somewhat wrong, but came and evangelized it profoundly. There's crosses. The entire, I don't know if anybody's been to South Korea? No? So you go to South Korea, and it's the first thing you notice is like the entire landscape is like littered with these neon crosses. All the churches have neon crosses. It's a profoundly religious and Christian country in a way that's almost strange because you wonder how it got there, and then you find out, well, the American Christians brought it with them, which is something, well. March 1st, 2004. I finally finished Deuteronomy, reading the book. God is still telling the people of Israel how to deal with their new land, how to treat people who do bad things like cross-dressing. True story, if you read this, cross-dressing in the Bible. This is the New International Version, though, so it may be a little more hip than the King James Version. And that every 7 years, people should cancel all debts to others on the day of release, quote unquote. I plan to call my credit card company this afternoon and ask them when my day of release will be. I was also surprised to see the term nocturnal emission used in this book, or any book of the Bible. Is that a proper translation, I wonder? It's an interesting book, the Bible. If you haven't read it. I don't know if I got the wrong translation, but this is the one that Becky recommended, so I thought, don't know. Maybe it was a Korean, yeah. Nocturnal emission in the Bible, who would expect? March 11, 2004, I can't sleep tonight. I spent 2 hours lying in bed thinking of everything and nothing, listening for God and hearing my own voice. Eventually I thought of something to write. I think that some people need spirituality in their lives, not so much to I never remember how this word is pronounced. Assuage, thank you. Assuage their fear of death, but to provide a sense of goodness and hope that their life previously lacked. Lying in bed tonight waiting for sleep, I realized that I may be one of those people. I wasn't a bad person, but I wasn't always as good as I should have been. I was a rather negative and pessimistic person, always looking for the bad in people, often feeling hopeless. I feel like if this search has given me anything, it's given me the desire to be a better person, the ability to see light through the darkest of times, and these things have made me feel happy, at peace. Not that I didn't feel happy before this search, just now that it feels more genuine. Something like that. So I should add that Becky was aware of this site, and she had been reading it, and we had been talking on the phone intermittently while this was going on. And Becky was, I didn't add, a little bit crazy, which is a whole other story, but part of the story, right? And her mom was a very born, even more evangelical, even more profoundly religious and Christian than she was, and she would post on the blog these comments, and she would get in arguments with people. But it was becoming complicated. And anyway, here's a little more Bible. This is spoiler alert. Judges has the famous story of Samson and Delilah, which I will summarize for you here. Samson is a meathead, born very strong but very stupid, with a strange affinity for riddle making. Samson is so strong that at one point he takes 1,000 Philistines out with a donkey's jawbone. A donkey's jawbone. Which makes the Philistines angry and scared. Eventually he falls for this Philistine woman named Delilah. The other Philistines offer her lots of money if she can find out why Samson is so strong. So Delilah asks Samson how he got to be so big and strong. Does Samson ever wonder why Delilah asked him about the secret to his strength? Of course not, because he's a meathead. At first, Samson is smart and he lies to her. But Delilah acts all hurt that he's been lying to her, so Samson eventually gives in and tells her the truth. It's his hair that makes him so strong. So once he is asleep, a Philistine barber comes and shaves all his hair off, then gouges out his eyes for good measure. In the end, however, Samson gets revenge in the form of a suicidal temple destruction. What is the moral to this story? This is in the Bible. Barbers, Philistine barbers? Does any? Okay. I'm still looking back and I forgot all. This is a famous story too. I mean, am I the only one who finds this? Okay. What is the moral to this story? I'm at a loss, but perhaps I'm missing something. I think it says something about how barbers and hairdressers, while useful to most people, are not for everyone. So everybody knows the story of Samson and Delilah, and I still don't really get what the point of that story is. So Becky and I continued to kind of correspond on and off, and we met in New York City over the summer. We were both on break, and at one point we decided we were going to get married. She decided that the Christianity, that she could be above the Christianity, that didn't really matter, because she was, as I said, a little bit crazy. Which I guess was confusing to me, but really it was all right, because that was what I wanted. And part of me felt like, well, maybe I should see this as a sign from God that, all these prayers and all this stuff should work, but nah. I mean, I think part of me did, but I think really, if there was April 2nd, 2004, if there were to be evidence proving that God exists, what kind of evidence would it have to be? Would we actually have to see God, or would a repeated experiment proving that, quote, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth be enough? Would something supernatural have to happen? Would God have to do tricks? Further, would spirituality be the same if there was undeniable evidence of God's existence? If the mystery of God was no longer a mystery, would religion still maintain its popularity? Would church-going increase or decrease? Is the idea of faith such a fundamental part of religious belief? These things I wonder about while riding a bus today. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to interject, and I'll get through these. I can skip this one. So while I was reading the Bible and while I was searching for God, I found that the biggest problem that I could not overcome was the idea that frankly, like Becky talked about a lot, but that a lot of people talked about a lot, was this idea that there has to be a choice. That a perfectly good person who is not a Christian would not be getting into heaven, while a perfectly horrible person who just went to somebody and said, I'm sorry, could get the ticket into the happy place. And, on the blog there's a lot of comments going back and forth about this ridiculousness. And beyond that, the fact that nobody, even in the Christian faith, can agree upon what the Christian faith is. And it was almost hilarious because I would make a post about that idea, like why can't anybody agree on Christianity? And there would be 18 comments arguing about what Christianity is, back and forth and back and forth and back. No, but what he meant to say is blah, 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 blah. And that's, to me, like, why. And beyond that, there's a lot of people killed and all that with God. So that's bad too, right?
Yeah.
We can have the Q&A later. So I was struggling, At first I found comfort in this whole thing, and it started to become a place where I was not really finding a lot of comfort. But then again, Becky was starting to come back to me, so who knows? I mean, what do I know? August 22nd, 2004. From what I can gather, the essence of Jesus' teaching, the truly revolutionary idea that he preached, was that we should all just love one another. Everything else stems from that basic and really wonderful idea. Yet there are wars being fought in the name of Christianity. There are people who justify their biases and hatreds using quotes from the Bible. There are so many people who say they are following the teachings of Jesus Christ, but who are really more full of selfishness and hate and prejudice than many non-believers. Christianity is no longer about the teachings of Jesus Christ. For many, it is simply a comfortable label that they attach to themselves. Much of my struggle with Christianity comes from this. The teachings and philosophy of Jesus Christ are beautiful. Much of what Christianity has become in the world is not. It would be much easier for me to accept Jesus Christ if by doing so I wouldn't have to become a Christian. So then I actually got through the whole Bible. And it is very long and very boring. And for those of you who have read it, the few of you, it is long and boring. Did you read the New International Version? You don't remember? I don't believe you read the Bible. I don't believe it. Okay. But it's very long. The New Testament is actually more interesting than the other one, but then the New Testament, I don't suggest. This is not on your reading list. I would not put this on my reading list unless you're, wow, a lot of silence. That's hard. Saying this, don't put that on your reading list, is not popular. Okay, moving along. I finally finished the Bible today, September 2nd, 2004. I read both the Peters, all three Johns, Jude, and Revelations over a tall coffee at Starbucks this afternoon. Cover to cover, it took me almost 8 months to read, from January 10th to September 2nd. As books go, it was pretty good. It was a bit repetitive in many places, rather wordy in others, and usually quite hard to decipher. It's easy to understand how people interpret it in so many different ways, but not so hard to see the essential truth being conveyed. God is love, 1 John 4:16. I think that this perfect and simple truth should, but too often doesn't, supersede many of the unfortunate interpretations being made of the Bible. It's pretty clear by the end of the book that this is the main idea. How is it that so many people seem to be missing this? I should amend this by saying that I realize that many people do understand and live by this idea, but the problem to me is that many people who don't. I'll continue. Not many left. February 13th. By this point, actually no, I'll go back. By this point, me and Becky were no longer getting married. She had decided that it was done. And we had stopped talking. We kind of had an ending of sorts on New Year's Eve of 2004. And for a long time, I was in a pretty bad place. But I kind of tried to keep on with this, but it was harder now because there was not really anything worthwhile to do so. But I tried. And I guess this is about as conclusive as I got. This is one of the second to last posts that I had. February 13th, 2005. I've spent a year wondering about God. I've read the Bible from cover to cover. I've had discussions and arguments with both spiritual and non, and here I am. I believe that there is a God, a higher power that we don't understand, but I really don't know what the nature of that God is or what this God demands of us. If this God actually interferes in our lives or just watches us flail about. I was an agnostic bordering on atheism a year and a half ago. Now that I consider God, I don't know what to do with him, her/it. Perhaps I should read the Quran now. And then what? The Mormon Bible? So many religious texts, so little time. This brings me back to my struggle accepting Christianity. To follow the Christian path is to render all other paths wrong. And I really don't think that God would want it that way. So much of the spiritual path we choose, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, etc., seems based on where we were born, how we were raised. That for God to essentially punish those who choose wrong seems essentially unfair. I think God, if anything, is fair. Does that make sense to anyone? That was what I wrote. It's not a question. So that's about where I ended up. And that's kind of where I am now, in a way. Although I'd say I'm more on the level of an atheist now. And as for where Becky is today, she ended up falling in love with a Jewish man. Moving to New York City and converting to Judaism. Thank you.